First.
All right. Okay, Boker Tov, everyone. This week's Parsha of Kitisa is naturally the Parsha regarding the golden calf, the Lazov. And I want to combine the short discussion of that with the ideas of Purim that are fast upon us in a few weeks. The Gemara in Megillah asks, what is the fundamental difference between the miracle of Purim and the miracle of Hanukkah? And the Gemara answers, because for the Purim, we have a Megillah. We have a written book, one of the 24 books of the Tanakh. And for Hanukkah, there is no book. Hanukkah is not written. Kan nitan li katev, kan lo nitan li katev. Hanukkah is not written, Purim is written. That it was an attempt by the Maccabees to write a book about Hanukkah as well. And we have that book, the book of the Maccabees. And it's a large book with many details, but it never was accepted into the canon of the Holy Bible. And it remains a book in the Apocrypha, a book that scholars deal with, but it has no lasting holiness to it. Whereas the Megillah of Purim, Megillat Esther, there's a whole book of the Bible that deals with it. And that is the reason also, one of the reasons, why in the Talmud, Hanukkah acquires pretty short shrift. There's not much written about Hanukkah. And Purim has a Masechta all of its own, Masechet Megillah. Because if there is no book biksav, no book that is part of the written Torah, then there will not be a book regarding it in the oral Torah as well. Because the oral Torah, which to us is the Mishnah and the Talmud, is based exclusively on the written Torah. And if there's no written, then there's no room for an oral. So that's the reason that the Gemara advances between Purim and between Hanukkah. So then the question still arises, this answer, so to speak, still begs the question. So why is there no book that's written about Hanukkah? So we are introduced here by the great scholars of Israel over the ages to a concept that is very necessary for us to absorb, but is often difficult to appreciate. And that concept is that there is something in creation called eternal time. It is part of the natural world, so to speak. And the difference between that and commemorative time is obvious. Commemorative time commemorates an event that happened. It's a one-off. It happened and it no longer happens. And is therefore, by logic, a temporary event. There are events, however, that are continual throughout Jewish history, that are always present with us, that are part of eternal time. And that's what Esther meant when she said to the rabbis, Kitruni lidorot, write me that it should be eternal. And it says, V'yamei hapurim ha'ele lo yavru mitoch haYehudim u'mizarom. Purim never is over. Purim is part of eternal time. Hanukkah is not. Hanukkah is commemorative time. We commemorate miracles that once happened, events and wars that once occurred. But it's not part of our time structure now. Purim is part of the time structure now. And we see this reflected in so many ways in the prayers that we say. So in the Haggadah of Pesach, we'll say, Shebachol dor v'dor oni aleinu l'chaloseinu v'HaKadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu miyodom. That's Purim. Every generation is Purim. And Purim is a nes nistor, hidden miracle. On the surface, we don't see any miracles. It's political machinations, all sorts of strange characters. There's no nest there. Hanukkah is an open nest. Nevertheless, it's the nes nistor that remains with us for all time. So anything that's written in the Torah, that's written in the Tanakh, is written in eternal time and not in commemorative time. And therefore, in every generation, it is present. It is always germane. It always speaks to us. Whereas miracles that occurred in commemorative time are a recollection of things that events that happened once, but are not part of us again. And the Gaon of Vilna uses that to interpret the blessings that we make on miracles. She'osalonu nisim bayomi mahem bazman hazeh. So bayomi mahem, that's commemorative. That's Hanukkah. B'zman hazeh, in our time, those are miracles that are part of eternal time and current events. So that is the way to look at how miracles are represented for us. That's what the Gemara means, that Purim Esther Nitan Li Kosev, it was written. Anything that's written is eternal, it's not commemorative. It's always B'zman hazeh, it's always germane to our time. We can certainly see to it in our current situation. Omnim aleinu l'hargeinu. Yeah, the world would drown us in a teaspoonful of water if they could. So we are living through a Purim time. The only thing is that it's like Purim Nistor. It's hidden from us. You don't see it. But there's no question that miraculous things have occurred in the past few months. That the century from now, our descendants will look back upon it and say, wow. But Chazal said, Ein balanes makir beniso. A person to whom miracles occur doesn't recognize the time as being miraculous. That's why Esther had to ask that it be written down, because otherwise it's just a political story. It's something that people will discuss. And Esther wanted us to appreciate that Purim is eternal. And that's what one of the things the Gemara means when it says that Yom Kippurim is Kippurim. Yom Kippur is like Purim. Yom Kippur is eternal. Purim is eternal. And that's what Chazal meant when they said that even if all of the other books of the Bible are no longer necessary for us, somehow the Megillah of Purim will remain. Because that's our story. What is the story of the Jewish people? The story of Purim, that's the story. And it's the story of a Nes Nistar. Hidden miracles. What happens when one doesn't see it that way? What happens when at the most one sees it as being commemorative and not eternal? So then you have the story of the Egel, of the golden calf. Jewish people come out of Egypt. Yom Tzeischom Eretz Mitzrayim Arenu Niflaos. Going out of Egypt is a miracle. Moshe will say later in the Chumash, has it ever happened that a people emerged from the midst of another people that become strong and independent? And the sea split in front of them, and there were plagues, and there were miracles, and then the Lord grants them a Torah, and there's Kolotu Brakim, lightning, thunder, everything. Wow. But the Jewish people, or a section of the Jewish people, It's the difference between the tribe of Levi and the rest of the people. Most of the Jewish people saw it as a one-off event, commemorative. Things that are commemorative are always subject to change, to editing, to somehow becoming different than what it originally was. I always thought that in the United States, the conversion of American Independence Day, the 4th of July, into a tire sale, it was the beginning of the decline of America. That's not what Jefferson had in mind. But it's treated only as a commemorative day. Well, commemorative days, change, subject to reinterpretation, to societal pressures. So the question arises, how could the Jewish people worship a golden calf? After emerging from Egypt, after walking through the Red Sea, after hearing, so to speak, the voice of heaven at Sinai, after witnessing Moshe, how could that be? And part of the answer lies in the fact that they all thought that those were one-off events. Because we didn't have the Torah Shebaal Peh yet. But the Meforshim explain that when the Jewish people said Nasev Nishpa regarding the first set of Luchot, of the commandments, they accepted Torah Shebiksav. They did not willingly accept Torah Shebaal Peh yet. They would not accept Torah Shebaal Peh until the time of Esther, when she taught them that it was not a commemorative event, it was an eternal event. It was always here. Matan Torah is every day. Yetzias Mitzrayim is every day. That's why our whole prayer service is built upon that. Why do we build our prayer service upon events that happened 3,000 years ago, that we have no relationship to, that none of us ever saw? Because it's current events. Because it's not commemorative. We're talking about now. We're talking, so that's why it says, Oz Yoshir Moshe. Moshe will sing. Moshe sings throughout eternity. It's not that they sang once. That would make it a commemorative event. And they're making it an eternal event. One that Shebechol Dor V'Dor. So there are miracles that are Bayom Mohaim, that are commemorative, like Hanukkah. And there are miracles that are Bizman Hazeh, that are current. Except that the current miracles always appear as a nes nistor, as a hidden miracle. That's not obvious to the human eye. That requires faith and knowledge and tradition to understand that it's a miracle. So the fact that the Jewish people live in the land of Israel and that we have somewhat independent government. We have a Jewish state. So that's not a one-off event, that's an internal miracle. Except that it's hidden from us. It's covered by layers of personalities and events and diplomacy and all sorts of things that we think are real. So the worship of the golden calf is because they thought that everything that happened until then was only commemorative. No longer had a reality to themselves. So they were able to reinterpret the past, which is a constant threat that we face. So they said, this is the God that took you out of Egypt. How can anybody in a moment's sanity believe that a statue that's made out of gold did anything? But how can people believe that a boy is a girl and a girl is a boy? You see what people can believe. Not only believe it, to foist it upon you. And if you don't believe it, you're wrong. We're right. So that's how the Egel Azov occurs. The Egel Azov is the irresistible force of society. And it engulfed even Aaron, who was unable to stand up to it. He looked for ways to ameliorate it, stall, wait for time, the next election, who knows? Moshe is the one that has to crush it. And in a ruthless fashion. So that's real time. That's not commemorative time. I think all of us can appreciate that people would believe that a statue made of gold has somehow life to it, empowers, and could extract the Jewish people from Egypt. Because that was the zeitgeist. That was the spirit of the time. That was the media of the time. The New York Times would have a headline, "Golden Calf Revealed." That's how people think. And the Torah came to warn us because the Torah is always eternal time. So just like Shebachol Dor V'Dor Omdim Aleinu L'Chalaseinu, as we are witness, so too, Shebachol Dor V'Dor, there's an Egel Azov. If you will trace it throughout Jewish history, you'll see that paganism, Christianity, Islam, Enlightenment, democracy, whatever the society is engulfed with. It's present, powerful. It has millions of adherents. It looks to be in control. Chazal tell us that the Jewish people saw in the golden calf that it was alive, that it breathed fire. So the Mefarshim explained that naturally it did not. But you can talk yourself into it that it's alive. You can convince yourself. So for 15, 1800 years, paganism is, certainly it's alive. And that's what the Megillah comes to teach us. That all of these things that the Torah speaks about, and all of the narratives in Tanakh, that's why Tanakh is so important to study. They're not telling you stories. You know, when you're 6 years old and you have a book that says the little midrash says, so that's stories. The problem is 30 years later, you're still stuck on the little midrash says. You think it's all stories. Stories at best are only commemorative things. They're not real time. The Torah is real time. It's eternal. And therefore, everything that's written in the Torah is written as a commentary to us upon the world that we live in, the challenges that we face, the problems that exist. Torah is not telling you stories. The Torah tells you that Avram Avinu, everybody said it's your land. Oh, you know, there was a time when Hava Nagila was the major popular song in the United States. Today, an Israeli professor can't speak at Berkeley without being subjected to mob violence. So the Torah said, look at what happened to Avraham, right? They said, it's your country, it's your land, we appreciate it. Nasi Elokim Atov B'Socheinu, can't be a greater person than Avraham. Do whatever you want, we're honored. And if we're going to do something, is Arba Me'ov Shekel Kesef. You have to pay 400 shekel for a grave. It's not your country. You're occupiers. You're not entitled. So the Torah told us that narrative so that we could place it in our own narrative of the time. So we live in a Purim time. There's Haman. There's Achashverosh in the White House. There are all sorts of things going on. Nobody knows where the end will be. Time of great stress. So that's why Esther said, write down this story, because 2,800 years from now, the story will be relevant. You look in the Megillah, you'll see that somehow there's a hidden miracle that's going to save us all. Something that we could not predict. something that really we didn't even feel was within our power. That's an important lesson. It's a vital lesson. So when we mark things that occurred, even in our personal lives, we should realize that somehow there is eternity in play here. There's more to the story than meets the eye. And each and every one of us has such a story. And each and every one of us has a destiny story, a hidden miracle. And it's written down for us so that we realize that it's Bayomi Mahei, maybe, but it's certainly Bizman Hazeh in our time and in our circumstances. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you. Next Friday, there is a marathon here in Jerusalem, which I will not participate in. And because of the marathon, streets will be closed here in the neighborhood, even for pedestrians. So unfortunately, next Friday, you'll have to excuse me, we will not have a class, but we will resume 2 Fridays from now. And Saturday night, we have a lecture on anti-Semitism in the Roman world, 8 o'clock. Thank you.
Why do we have, and you're sworn as for an investor?